There's something unsettling about carnival mirrors, don't you think? The way they twist your reflection, making you question what's real and what's just an illusion. But what if, one day, the illusion refused to let you go? Tonight, dear listeners, I invite you to step inside a forgotten carnival, into a maze of glass and shadows, where the walls don't just reflect, but watch. Meet David Reynolds, a man who as a child wandered too far into a funhouse labyrinth and never truly found his way back. A place where laughter faded into whispers and something inhuman lurked within the endless corridors. A presence that still haunts him to this day. What did David encounter inside that maze? And more importantly, did he ever really escape? Dim the lights, settle in, and listen closely, because once you step inside, you may never find your way out.
Funny how memories work. Some fade like old photographs, their edges curling, their colors washed out, but others stay sharp, too sharp, refusing to let go, as if they're burned into your mind like an old scar. I was 10 years old when the carnival came to town. It was the summer of 1973, and even now, sitting here at 62, I can still smell the buttery popcorn, hear the distant hum of carnival music, and feel the warm evening air wrapping around me like a childhood embrace. Back then, growing up in a small town was nothing like today. Life was simple, predictable. We didn't have televisions in every house, no phones buzzing every minute, no distractions except the ones we made for ourselves. And trust me, we made them. We built forts in the woods, raced our bikes down dirt roads, and spent hours skipping rocks across the lake, arguing about who could get the most bounces. Summers were golden, stretching out endlessly in front of us. Days were spent barefoot, running across yards, playing baseball behind Old Man Carson's gas station. At night, we'd chase fireflies, laughing as we cupped them in our hands and watched them flicker like tiny lanterns. People left their doors unlocked. Neighbors actually talked to each other, not just out of politeness, but because they cared. Everyone knew everyone, and if you ever got into trouble, your parents already knew before you even stepped foot inside the house. But for all its predictability, there was one event, one thing that shattered the monotony of our quiet little town. The carnival. It didn't come every year, and that only made it more special. Some summers it skipped us entirely, rolling past on its way to bigger cities. But when those rusted old trucks finally rolled into town, carrying rides, games, and flashing neon lights, it was like watching magic unfold right before our eyes. Word spread fast. Kids whispered excitedly about the Ferris wheel, the bumper cars, and the ring toss games where you could win a giant stuffed bear if you were lucky enough. The smell of fried dough and cotton candy would drift through the air, mixing with the distant sound of laughter and carnival barkers calling out for people to step right up and try their luck. I remember the night it opened. The sun had just set and the sky was a deep purple fading into black. The fairgrounds were alive with energy. Bright lights, ringing bells, the excited chatter of people weaving through the booths. My parents had given me a whole $1 to spend, and at 10 cents a ride, I felt like a king. I spent most of the night darting from game to game, trying to win a prize big enough to impress my friends. I even convinced myself I had a strategy for the ring toss. I didn't. But that summer was different because for the first time, standing just past the popcorn stand, tucked between the tilt-a-whirl and the haunted house, was something I had never seen before. A funhouse, the Hall of Mirrors, a massive sign above the entrance flashed in bright red lights, spelling out its name. Beneath it, painted in bold, sloppy letters, was a challenge. Can you escape? I still remember the smell of buttered popcorn and caramel apples hanging in the air, mixing with the sound of kids screaming on the rides and that cheesy carnival music playing over the loudspeakers. Man, summer in our little town, it wasn't summer without the fair rolling in. It was the highlight of the whole year. I was 10 years old, and back then, nothing felt more exciting, more magical than stepping through those rusted metal gates, my pockets stuffed with loose quarters, ready to burn through every single one of them. The lights, the music, the rides, it was like stepping into another world. That year, though, there was something different, something new. Mirror Maze, a huge gaudy sign with flashing red bulbs, spelled it out above the entrance. Below it, in sloppy, hand-painted letters, it read, "Can you escape?" I stopped dead in my tracks, just staring at it. The entrance was shaped like a giant clown's mouth, wide open in this exaggerated grin, and I swear, even at 10 years old, I thought that thing looked like it wanted to swallow me whole. I wasn't scared, though. I was thrilled. "Let's go," I shouted, already digging into my pocket for change. My friends weren't as enthusiastic. Jason and Mark hesitated, whispering to each other like that funhouse was some kind of death trap. "Dude, I heard some kid got lost in there last year," Jason muttered. "Took 'em hours to find him." "Yeah, right," I scoffed, rolling my eyes. "It's just mirrors." What's the worst that could happen? They weren't convinced, but I didn't care. The thrill of something new, something I'd never tried before, was too strong to ignore. So without a second thought, I handed the man in the booth my ticket and stepped inside. The second I walked in, I felt this rush of excitement. The whole place was bathed in this weird, bluish neon glow, making the mirrors shimmer like water. My own reflection bounced back at me from a dozen different angles, twisting and warping as I moved. One second I looked tall and stretched out like a noodle. The next I was short and stubby with a huge head. I laughed, spinning around, watching my reflection multiply and distort all around me. For a kid, it was pure magic. I zigzagged through the maze, reaching out to touch the glass, testing which paths were real and which were just tricks of the mirror. Sometimes I'd swear I found the right way, only to smack face first into my own reflection. I could hear kids laughing somewhere deeper inside, their voices bouncing off the glass walls. The air smelled weird, though, kind of dusty, old, like this attraction had been around for decades. I started wondering how many kids had walked through these same corridors. How many had stood right where I was, their tiny fingerprints smudging the glass. The deeper I went, the more the voices faded. The laughter grew distant. I stopped. That's when I realized something. I couldn't hear Jason or Mark anymore. And suddenly, the fun didn't feel like fun anymore. At first, it was fun. I darted through the maze, laughing to myself as my reflection multiplied endlessly around me. It was like stepping inside a dream, a world where I existed in every direction, stretched and twisted in impossible ways. I would take a step forward only to see 100 versions of myself mimicking my every move. Some tall and skinny, others short and bloated. It felt like a game, a puzzle waiting to be solved. But then something changed. The laughter I'd heard earlier, the distant echoes of kids deeper inside the maze, stopped. The playful giggles and chatter that had filled the air moments ago were gone, leaving only an eerie silence pressing in from all sides. My footsteps, once lost in the ambient noise of the carnival outside, now felt too loud. Each one bouncing off the mirrors, stretching unnaturally through the maze. I slowed my pace, suddenly aware of how alone I was. The funhouse music that had been playing, a cheerful looping melody that crackled through unseen speakers, began to warble. It sounded wrong, like a record being slowed down by a failing motor, the notes distorting into something sluggish, unnatural. I took a deep breath and pressed forward. I just had to find the way out. But no matter which way I turned, I just kept going deeper. Every path I took led me further inside, twisting and curling back on itself like the maze was shifting while I walked. I knew it was just an illusion, just the way these mirror mazes were designed, but the deeper I went, the less sure I became. Then the lights flickered. For a split second, the entire maze was plunged into darkness, and my heart leapt into my throat. When the flickering stopped, something was different. The mirrors didn't reflect the way they had before. My reflection was off, just barely. A fraction of a second out of sync, like an old film reel with the audio mismatched. When I moved, my reflection hesitated, just long enough for me to notice. I swallowed hard. It was just my imagination. A trick of the dim lighting, the warped glass, and then footsteps, not mine. They came from somewhere, at soft at first but growing louder, slow, the unmistakable sound of someone walking just around the bend. I felt a chill creep up my spine. I wasn't alone. The footsteps had stopped, I don't know how to explain it, but something changed. One minute I was just a kid messing around in a mirror maze, and the next, everything felt off. The laughter, gone. The carnival music, distant. Even the air felt thicker, like the walls were pressing in around me. I stopped walking, just stood there for a second, trying to listen. But the thing is, the silence was too loud. That kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl. I swallowed hard. The mirrors were everywhere, reflecting me from every angle, tall, short, stretched out, squashed down. I looked like a dozen different versions of myself. But then I noticed something. One of them wasn't quite right. Far in the back, past all the reflections, there was a shadow, not mine, something else. At first, I thought maybe it was just a weird trick of the glass or maybe another kid wandering the maze, but the more I looked, the more I realized it wasn't moving. Just stood there watching me. I felt my pulse start to race. My brain told me to turn around to check if there was actually someone there. But I couldn't. I didn't want to. Then it twitched. Not like a person shifting their weight, more like a puppet jerking to life on invisible strings. I took a slow step back, trying not to make a sound, and then the lights flickered for a second, just a second, everything went black. And when the lights came back on, the shadow was closer, way closer. I gasped, my breath catching in my throat. My hands went cold. I turned, ready to get the hell out of there. Bam! Something slammed against the glass. Not behind me, in front of me. I stumbled backward, my chest tightening, every hair on my body standing on end. And then I saw a handprint pressed against the mirror, but it wasn't mine. The fingers were too long, the palm too narrow. And the worst part, they started to drag down the glass. Like something inside was trying to get out. I should have run, I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I just stood there staring at that smudged handprint on the glass. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. And then I saw it, not in front of me, not with me, in the mirror. At first, I didn't even realize what I was looking at. My eyes were too busy darting from one reflection to another, searching for an exit, for something normal, something that made sense. Then my gaze landed on a shape, low, hunched, tucked away in the corner of one of the mirrors, far behind me. My breath hitched. It wasn't me. It wasn't anyone. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. The thing was small, barely reaching my waist. Its skin a wrinkled shade of gray, stretched tight like old leather. Its eyes, God, its eyes were deep, dark pits like twin holes punched into its face, way too big for its head. And its mouth, it was grinning. A wide, too wide grin stretching from one side of its face to the other, revealing these needle-thin teeth crammed together like a shark's. It wasn't moving, just watching me. A trick of the light, I told myself. My own reflection distorted by the warped glass. That's all it was. But then it moved, not smoothly like a person would. It jerked like an old animatronic glitching out, its limbs twitching, its head tilting at an unnatural angle. My mouth went dry. I turned my head, fast expecting to see it standing there behind me, just inches away. But there was nothing. Nothing except rows and rows of mirrors. I spun back to the reflection, and it was still there. Same spot, same awful grin. Closer. It hadn't moved in the real world, only in the reflection. And that's when I realized it wasn't trapped in there with me. I was trapped in there with it. I blinked, and in that split second, it was gone. My body felt locked in place, my mind screaming at me to move, but I couldn't. My hands were ice cold, my legs stiff. Every nerve in my body was on high alert, waiting, listening. The mirrors stretched in every direction, rows upon rows of twisted reflections. I turned my head slowly, scanning for it. Heart hammering so hard it felt like it would burst out of my ribs. Nothing, and then right behind me, a whisper, low, garbled, like someone trying to speak underwater. I didn't think, I just ran. I tore down the corridor, shoving past mirrors, barely dodging my own distorted reflection as I took turn after turn, desperate to find a way out. My own breath sounded deafening, ragged, sharp, and that's when I noticed it. The mirrors were changing. They weren't sleek and polished anymore. The glass was filthy, smeared with streaks of something dark. Fingerprints, handprints, smudged against the surface like someone had been pounding on them from the inside. My reflection was different too. The boy staring back at me wasn't me anymore. His face was stretched, twisted into something wrong. His eyes were hollow, his skin sagging like melted wax. His lips moved, but no sound came out. And then the mirrors cracked. Not one, all of them. Hairline fractures webbing across the glass like frozen lightning. A sharp, ear-piercing screech tore through the air. so loud I dropped to my knees, clutching my ears. It felt like the whole funhouse was splitting apart, groaning, shuddering. And then, just behind me, so close I could feel the breath on my neck, a voice. Low, raspy, inhuman. I don't know what it said. I don't think it was any language I could understand. It was just a sound that shouldn't exist. I had to turn, and it was there, no longer trapped in the mirrors, standing right behind me. I screamed and I ran. I don't remember when I stopped running. 1 second I was tearing through the maze, every nerve in my body screaming for me to keep moving. And then I saw her, a little girl, just standing there in one of the corridors, perfectly still. She looked about 8, maybe 9. Blonde hair, pale skin, a simple white dress that almost seemed to glow in the dim light. And the weirdest part, she wasn't afraid. Not even a little. She just watched me, calm, like none of this was happening, like I wasn't gasping for breath, like I hadn't just been running for my life. My throat was dry and my legs aching, but I forced myself to speak. Run, I croaked. There's something in here. We have to go. But she didn't move, didn't flinch. She only tilted her head slightly, like I'd just said something completely normal, and replied, I know. I stared at her, trying to process what I'd just heard. Not, what are you talking about? Not what's going on. Just, I know. A chill ran through me, but I tried again. Then, we gotta get out of here. My voice came out unsteady. She shook her head. Don't worry, she said, her voice so soft it almost didn't feel real. He's always here. I stiffened. I knew exactly who she meant. My breath felt uneven as I turned my head, scanning the mirrors, looking for him. And there he was, watching. The duende hadn't moved. He stood just beyond the edge of the corridor, his black, sunken eyes fixed on us. But something was off. He wasn't grinning anymore. His whole posture had changed. His usual jerky movements were gone. His head was lowered slightly, his shoulders tense. And that's when it hit me. He was afraid, but not of me. The little girl reached out and took my hand. Her fingers warm. That's what I remember the most. After everything, The freezing air, the distorted reflections, the feeling of being hunted. Her touch was the first thing that felt real. "Come on," she said gently. "I'll take you to the exit." And for some reason, I believed her. So I let her lead me deeper into the maze while the creature in the mirrors just stood there and didn't follow. Something changed the moment she took my hand. The second her fingers wrapped around mine, the cold disappeared. The heavy, suffocating air that had been pressing down on me, gone. The smell of dust and something rotten, the flickering lights, the cracked, filthy mirrors, all of it started fading. With every step we took, the maze looked less twisted, less nightmarish. The glass grew clear again, reflecting me properly without warping or distorting my face. The dim, sickly glow of the overhead lights warmed, brightening into something soft and golden. It was like she was fixing everything just by being there. I glanced at her, heart still pounding in my chest. She looked so calm, like she'd never been afraid, like she knew exactly what she was doing. My voice came out hoarse and steady. "You know how to get to the exit?" She just nodded. No words, no hesitation. I swallowed hard and let her lead me, my mind racing. And I didn't know why, but I felt safe. I hadn't felt that way since stepping into the maze, not once. We kept walking. The corridors that had twisted and looped endlessly before now seemed to stretch in one clear direction, as if there had never been dead ends, never been any tricks to keep me trapped inside. Then, all at once, the exit. It was right there, a few feet ahead. The deep red curtain at the entrance was swaying gently, and beyond it, I could see the faint glow of the carnival lights. I stopped, barely able to believe it. I turned to the girl, gripping her hand tighter. "We did it," I breathed. "Come on, let's go." She didn't move. She just stood there smiling softly. And that's when I noticed she wasn't holding my hand anymore. I blinked, looking down at my own fingers, empty. A strange feeling crawled up my spine. I took a step back. "You're not coming?" I asked, confused. "Why aren't you coming?" She just kept smiling. And then, in that same gentle voice, she said, "I can't leave." I stared at her, my pulse thudding in my ears. "What? Why not?" She tilted her head slightly, like she was amused by my question. Because I'm not like you, she said simply. I swallowed. What do you mean? She took a small step forward, and for the first time, I noticed something strange. She wasn't casting a reflection, not in the mirrors, not anywhere. I felt my throat tighten. Who are you? I whispered. And she smiled, a warm, knowing smile. I am the Holy Spirit of God, she said. My mission is to guide you, not to walk through the door for you. I felt everything around me slow down. Her words hung in the air, heavy, but not in a way that scared me. It was like something inside me had been shaken awake, like a truth I had always known but never understood. I turned to look at the exit again, just for a second, feeling my head spin. And when I turned back, she was gone. I don't remember stepping through the exit. One second, I was standing there staring at the empty space where the girl had been. The next, I was outside. The carnival was still buzzing with life. Laughter, bright lights, the smell of popcorn and fried dough. Everything was normal, but I wasn't. Something had changed. I turned back to the entrance of the funhouse, half expecting to see her standing there watching me. But there was no one, just me. Just my own reflection staring back from the mirrors inside. For the longest time, I just stood there, trying to make sense of what had happened. Had it even happened? Or had my mind played some twisted trick on me? But deep down, I knew what I had seen. I knew who she was, and I knew I had been given a choice: to stay lost in the maze, running from something I didn't understand, or to let myself be guided out. That night, I didn't tell anyone what had happened, not Jason, not Mark, not my parents. I don't think I even had the words for it back then, but I carried it with me. I carried it for years. And even now, at 62 years old, I still find myself thinking about that maze, that girl, that creature lurking in the glass. Because the truth is, I never really left it. Not entirely. See, I learned something in that maze, something I didn't understand at 10 years old, but I do now. That wasn't just a carnival attraction. That was a mirror of life itself. People get lost. They find themselves trapped in their own mazes. Fear, regret, addiction, depression, running in circles, desperate for a way out. Some keep running forever. Some don't even realize they're lost. And some find a hand reaching out in the darkness, ready to lead them to the exit. That's why I do what I do now. That's why I spend my time helping others find their way out. I volunteer at a small church, working with people who feel like they're stuck, trapped in something they don't know how to escape. I listen, I talk, and sometimes I just sit in silence with them until they're ready to take that first step forward. Because I know what it feels like to be trapped, and I know what it means when someone reaches out a hand and says, "Come on, I'll take you to the exit."
Life is full of mazes. Some are easy to escape, others not so much. We all get lost, don't we? Trapped in places we never meant to be. Fear, regret, loneliness, guilt. Running in circles, searching for a way out, hoping that maybe, just maybe, we'll find an exit before it's too late. But sometimes we can't do it alone. Sometimes we need a hand to guide us through the darkness, a voice to remind us that no matter how twisted the path may seem, there's always a way out. David never forgot what happened that night, because he understood that the scariest mazes aren't made of glass and mirrors. They're the ones we build in our own minds. And the question is, when someone reaches out a hand to lead you out of the dark, will you take it? Do you have your own chilling experience? Visit our brand new website at gordon.com and submit your story. Who knows, your tale might be featured in our next video. The link is waiting for you in the description. If you enjoyed tonight's story, let me take you deeper into the unknown. In our last video, The Midnight Passenger, a late-night rideshare turns into something far more terrifying when a driver realizes the man he picked up was never supposed to be there. Click the video on your screen now, and I'll meet you there. Until next time,